Gunfire shattered the dawn silence as another volley of bullets peppered the weathered brick facade. Inside the modest two-story house, Colonel James Harmon steadied his breathing and adjusted his position behind the reinforced windowsill. The spent brass casings from his rifle littered the hardwood floor around his boots. Outside, cartel vehicles blocked every street leading into Esperanza, the small border town he'd called home since retiring. Black smoke billowed from the municipal building downtown. Through his scope, Harmon counted 12 armed men using the abandoned Garcia grocery store for cover. Their matte black SUVs formed a perimeter around his property, the only house in town still flying the American flag. The red, white, and blue fabric snapped defiantly in the hot Texas wind, even as dust and debris kicked up around its pole. "Last chance, old man," a voice called out in accented English. "The town surrendered yesterday. You're alone now." Harmon didn't bother responding. The cartel had spent 3 months methodically taking over Esperanza, first with money, then with threats, finally with violence. Yesterday, Mayor Diaz had publicly handed over control in the town square, flanked by men with gold-plated pistols and dead eyes. The sheriff's department had surrendered their weapons. The Border Patrol outpost stood abandoned. Every home and business now flew white flags. Every home except this one. If you believe in stories that celebrate bravery and honor, subscribe now and join us. There's plenty more heroism ahead. Harmon's earpiece crackled. "Eagle's Nest, this is Watchman. Convoy approaching from the south. For vehicles, heavily armed. ETA 5 minutes. Copy, Watchman," Harmon replied, recognizing Sheriff Martinez's voice. His old Army colleague might have surrendered his badge publicly, but some loyalties ran deeper than fear. Sweat trickled down Harmon's neck as he methodically checked his ammunition reserves. After 30 years commanding Army Rangers in combat zones across 3 continents, he'd never imagined making his final stand in his childhood hometown, 12 miles north of the Rio Grande. The cartel had miscalculated. They saw only an aging retiree in a forgotten town, not the veteran who'd specialized in training local populations to resist occupation, not the tactician who'd written the Army Field Manual on asymmetric warfare. They certainly hadn't noticed his preparations over the past 2 months, as their presence in town gradually increased. A bullet splintered the wooden frame inches from his head. Harmon didn't flinch. His weathered hands remained steady on his rifle as he tracked movement across the street. The distant sound of helicopter rotors reached his ears, not close enough to be relevant yet, but coming. Through his scope, he spotted a new figure emerging from the lead SUV, a man in an expensive suit rather than tactical gear. The cartel leadership had arrived, expecting to witness his surrender or his execution. Harmon's finger hovered over the trigger as memories flashed through his mind. Villages in Afghanistan, towns in Iraq, communities that had faced similar choices between submission and resistance. He thought of his grandchildren who had visited last summer, playing in the same yard now surrounded by cartel gunmen. "Colonel, civilian vehicles evacuating westbound," Martinez reported through the earpiece. Maria got the school bus out with most of the children. That was something, at least. Harmon had known the cost when he made his choice. The moment he'd raised the American flag that morning while the rest of the town surrendered, he'd accepted the consequences. What he couldn't accept was watching his hometown become another casualty in a war most Americans preferred to ignore. The man in the suit raised a megaphone. "Colonel Harmon, I am Diego Fuentes. Perhaps you've heard of me. Your situation is hopeless. The town belongs to us now, but I respect your courage. Surrender now, and you may leave with your life." Harmon recognized the name, the regional cartel lieutenant responsible for dozens of killings. His arrival confirmed what Harmon had suspected. Esperanza wasn't just another smuggling route. Whatever they were planning here was significant enough to draw their leadership. The distant helicopter sound grew louder. Reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time, if they were coming at all. Border Patrol was stretched thin, and the state troopers were an hour away at minimum. Fuentes gestured, and his men began to advance systematically, using the abandoned vehicles for cover. Professional. Disciplined. These weren't street thugs but trained combatants, likely deserters from Mexican special forces. Harmon drew a slow breath and centered his scope on Fuentes. One shot might buy time, create confusion. But he had prepared for this moment with something far more valuable than just ammunition and barricades. He had prepared with knowledge of the terrain, the community, and the enemy now surrounding him. As the cartel closed in on the last house and Esperanza still flying the American flag, they remained unaware they were walking into a veteran's carefully planned battle space. 3 months earlier, Colonel James Harmon stood on his front porch, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint the distant mountains with amber light. At 6'2", his 6-foot frame remained upright and solid, though the desert wind now stirred silver instead of brown in his military short hair. 30 years in the Army had left its marks, a slight limp from shrapnel in Fallujah, a web of scars across his left forearm from a firefight in Kandahar, and eyes that never quite stopped scanning the horizon. Esperanza had changed since his childhood. The border town had slowly withered as younger generations sought opportunities elsewhere. Storefronts on Main Street stood vacant, their windows dusty and signs faded. The population had dwindled to just under 2,000 residents, mostly elderly folks who lived there their entire lives and Hispanic families with deep roots in the region. Harmon sipped his coffee, black, no sugar, and noted the unfamiliar black SUV moving slowly down Mesquite Road for the 3rd time this week. Nothing conclusive, but worth logging in his mental record. Old habits. His former commanders had often joked that Harmon could spot a pattern in chaos faster than any intelligence software. "Morning, Colonel," called Mrs. Vasquez from next door, where she was watering the desert willows that separated their properties. Maria Vasquez, 45 and widowed, taught 5th grade at Esperanza Elementary. "Ready for your reading session today?" Harmon smiled and raised his mug in greeting. Every Wednesday for the past 3 years, since returning to his hometown, he'd volunteered to read to Maria's students. Today was Profiles and Courage Day. "Wouldn't miss it, Maria. Those kids are the future of this town." She nodded, though her expression carried a hint of worry. "If there is a future. The Garcia Grocery is closing next month. That's the 3rd business this year." Harmon had noticed. Just as he'd noticed the increase in unfamiliar vehicles, the new security consultants, hired by Mayor Diaz without council approval, and the nervous glances from Border Patrol agents when certain topics arose. Something was changing in Esperanza, something that raised the hairs on the back of his neck, the same way they'd risen before ambushes and mountain passes half a world away. Inside his modest home, Harmon's military precision remained evident in every detail. Bookshelves lined with military history and tactical manuals stood alongside cherished family photos. His late wife Grace smiled from silver frames. Their wedding day, her holding their daughter Catherine as a newborn, the 3 of them at Catherine's college graduation. Grace had passed 6 years ago after a battle with cancer, just before his retirement. Her loss had sent him back to Esperanza, seeking roots and purpose. The living room wall held his service commendations, 3 silver stars, the Legion of Merit, multiple bronze stars, alongside faded photos of his Rangers in various deployments. Afghanistan, Iraq, Colombia, Philippines. Men and women he'd trained, led, and sometimes buried. The old man, they'd called him, even when he was in his 40s. The commander who never left anyone behind, and who could improvise a solution to seemingly impossible situations. Harmon moved to his study where a ham radio sat alongside modern communications equipment, his connection to a network of former colleagues scattered across the globe. He maintained these relationships meticulously, the same way he maintained his physical conditioning with dawn runs and the shooting range he'd built on his property. The calendar on his desk showed Catherine and the grandkids would visit next month from Austin, where she worked as an attorney. Daniel was 8 now, Emma 6, both already showing their grandfather's stubborn independence and their grandmother's compassion. Harmon smiled at the thought of teaching them tracking in the arroyos behind his property, the same way his own grandfather had taught him. His morning routine continued with tactical precision, 20 minutes of stretching to counter old injuries, a protein-heavy breakfast, then equipment checks. The gun safe in his bedroom closet. The go-bags in his truck and by the back door. The reinforced window frames he'd installed last year, a home improvement project neighbors assumed was just an old man's hobby. At 8:45 a.m., Harmon pulled his faded blue Ford pickup into the elementary school parking lot. He carried a stack of books and a small box containing mementos from his deployments. Nothing alarming for children, just patches, coins, and harmless artifacts he used to illustrate the world beyond Esperanza's dusty streets. Colonel Harmon. The children's voices rang with genuine excitement as he entered Maria's classroom. Their small town didn't offer many visitors, and Harmon's stories, carefully edited for young ears, transported them to distant mountains and deserts. At ease, troops, he replied with a wink, setting his materials on Maria's desk. 20 young faces looked up at him expectantly, representing the town's diverse heritage. Harmon knew each of their names, their strengths, their struggles. In retirement, he discovered a gift for connecting with children that decades of commanding soldiers hadn't revealed. Today we're talking about courage, he began, his commanding voice softening. Not just the kind that wins medals, but everyday courage. The kind that speaks truth when it's easier to stay silent. The kind that stands firm when others step back. As he spoke, Sheriff Daniel Martinez appeared in the classroom doorway, catching Harmon's eye with a subtle nod. They'd served together years ago before Martinez returned home to wear a different uniform. The gesture was their old signal, "We need to talk." Harmon continued his lesson, but part of his mind was already analyzing the sheriff's expression, his posture, the timing of this unusual visit. When the children broke into group activities, he stepped into the hallway where Martinez waited. "Jim," Martinez said quietly, using Harmon's first name as only old friends did. "Found something you should see. Not official business. Not yet. Location: North Arroyo, by the old Phillips Ranch. After your class." Harmon nodded. The exchange completed in less than 15 seconds before returning to the classroom. To the children, nothing had happened. To Harmon, the day had just shifted from routine to reconnaissance. After finishing with the children, he drove his pickup along the dusty back roads toward the Arroyo, a dry riverbed that wound through the ranchlands north of town. The Phillips property had been abandoned for years, its water rights sold off during the last drought. Harmon parked out of sight behind a ridge and approached on foot, an old reflex from countless patrols. Martinez waited beside his sheriff's department SUV, sunglasses concealing his expression. At 55, the sheriff still maintained the physical discipline they'd shared during their service years. He handed Harmon a pair of binoculars without a word and pointed toward the dilapidated ranch house. Through the magnified lenses, Harmon observed 4 men unloading crates from a panel truck into the supposedly abandoned structure. Their movements were efficient, practiced. Military or paramilitary training. The crates were consistent with weapons shipments Harmon had seen in a dozen conflict zones, long, reinforced, with stenciled markings partially obscured. "Third delivery this month," Martinez said quietly. "First 2 were at night. Getting bolder." "Local jurisdiction?" Harmon asked, continuing to observe. "Technically mine, but Mayor Diaz told me to focus on town problems, not empty buildings in the county." The bitterness in Martinez's voice was evident. "Called Border Patrol. They took notes, said they'd look into it." "But they won't," Harmon concluded, lowering the binoculars. 2 agents who were asking questions got transferred last month. The new captain came from Douglas. Rumor says he's on Cartel payroll. Harmon nodded, processing. Cartel presence has been growing on both sides of the border. Los Hierros, most likely. The Iron Ones, Martinez translated unnecessarily. They've been pushing north, taking territory from older cartels. More disciplined. Many ex-military. Their leadership doesn't flash cash or make headlines, but their reach keeps extending. Harmon handed back the binoculars. What about state police? Need more than suspicious deliveries. And honestly, Jim, I'm not sure who I can trust anymore. That's why I came to you. Martinez lowered his voice further. There's talk of budget cuts. Town council's voting next week on contracting private security instead of maintaining the sheriff's department. The company they're considering? Created 18 months ago, headquartered in Mexico City with a shell office in El Paso. The implications hung in the dry desert air between the two veterans. Harmon had seen this pattern before in vulnerable communities worldwide. Criminal organizations moving in gradually, corrupting local government, replacing legitimate security forces, establishing parallel power structures before citizens fully comprehended what was happening. Your family's still in El Paso? Harmon asked. Martinez nodded. Lisa and the kids. Suggested they visit her sister in Colorado for a while. She thinks I'm being paranoid. You're not. Harmon surveyed the landscape, his tactical mind automatically identifying cover, concealment, lines of sight, potential defensive positions, a mental map forming. I need to make some calls. There are people who should know about this. Careful, Jim. Whatever's happening here has tendrils in places we don't expect. 2 reporters from the El Paso newspaper started asking questions last month about property purchases along the border. One's in the hospital after a mugging. The other stopped returning calls. Harmon clapped his old friend on the shoulder. Understood. Low profile. But I'm not sitting this out, Daniel. As they parted ways, Harmon's mind was already cataloging resources, analyzing vulnerabilities, formulating contingencies. Retirement had never suited him anyway. That evening, as sunset painted the western sky crimson and gold, Harmon sat on his porch cleaning his grandfather's lever-action rifle, a ritual of maintenance rather than preparation. His satellite phone lay on the table beside a notebook filled with observations in his precise handwriting. Catherine called as darkness fell, her voice bringing warmth to the cooling desert evening. They spoke of the grandchildren's school achievements, her latest court case, plans for their upcoming visit. Harmon shared nothing of his concerns, his voice betraying none of the situational awareness that had shifted into high gear. Some burdens weren't meant for sharing. After ending the call, he retreated to his study where a topographical map of Esperanza and surrounding areas covered his desk. He marked the Phillips Ranch with a red X, then added other locations he'd noted with unusual activity in recent weeks. A pattern emerged: properties along potential transit routes, locations with good visibility, strategic positions. His satellite phone vibrated with an encrypted message from a former intelligence colleague, now working private sector in Washington. Checked names. Connections confirmed. Local assets compromised. Proceed with caution. Harmon deleted the message immediately. Translation: the cartel infiltration was deeper than suspected, and official channels couldn't be trusted. He was on his own, a familiar position from his special operations days when his teams had operated behind enemy lines with minimal support. The next morning, Harmon altered his routine subtly. His usual dawn run extended past Maria Vasquez's house, where he paused to help her with a stubborn garden hose. Actually, a perfect opportunity to quietly mention that she might want to prepare an evacuation plan for her students, just as a precaution. Her eyes widened briefly, but the schoolteacher nodded without questioning. Maria had grown up on the border. She understood unspoken warnings. At the diner on Main Street, Harmon lingered over breakfast, engaging in casual conversation with Esperanza's morning regulars. His questions about the upcoming town meeting seemed innocent, but he was mapping relationships, influences, vulnerabilities. Who spoke confidently about the new security contract? Who looked down at their coffee instead of meeting eyes? The human terrain was as critical as the physical landscape. Frank Wilson, who owned the hardware store and had served in the Gulf War, caught Harmon in the parking lot afterward. "Colonel, got those special order hinges you wanted." His voice was normal volume. but his eyes darted toward a black SUV across the street. "Come by the store, and I'll show you the installation technique." An hour later, in the back room of Wilson's Hardware, Frank kept his voice low as he laid out what he knew. The town council's decisions being made before meetings. Cash purchases of struggling businesses by shell companies. Strangers conducting surveillance of Border Patrol movements. Old Man Jenkins' ranch caught fire 3 days after he refused a generous purchase offer. "Not much of a coincidence," Harmon observed. "Got 3 other business owners worried," Frank continued. "They're getting pressured to sell. Jose at the garage, Diane's pharmacy, and the Rivera family restaurant. All strategic. The garage controls the fuel supply, the pharmacy stocks chemicals, and the restaurant sits at the main intersection." Harmon nodded. "Control points. That military stuff mean anything to you now, Colonel? Because folks around here remember you wrote some manual on community resistance that they teach at the War College. Asymmetric defense protocols for civilian environments," Harmon corrected. "And yes, it means something. It means Esperanza is being systematically targeted by an organization with professional planning capabilities. The question is why this town, why now?" Frank leaned against his workbench. "Interstate access? Close to the border? Small enough to control? All possible factors." Harmon paused. "I need eyes and ears, Frank. People who won't attract attention but notice details. Like who's selling out and who's standing firm." "Exactly. Can you help with that?" Frank straightened to his full height. 7th Infantry taught me something about loyalty, Colonel. I'm still taking orders if you're still giving them." As May turned to June, Harmon established what he privately termed a passive intelligence network throughout Esperanza. Maria Vasquez, whose teacher's presence at school functions went unquestioned. Frank Wilson, whose deliveries gave him access to homes and businesses. The Rivera family's teenage sons, whose paper route provided perfect cover for observing patterns of movement. Mrs. Takahashi, the elderly widow whose birdwatching hobby legitimized binoculars and dawn vigils. Harmon compiled their observations methodically, the situation clarifying. Los Hierros was executing a textbook infiltration of Esperanza. Phase 1, economic penetration, was nearly complete. Phase 2, security replacement, was underway with the pending vote to outsource the sheriff's department. Phase 3 would be territorial control. The only remaining question was their ultimate objective. The answer came from an unexpected source. Catherine called one evening, her voice tense. "Dad, something strange is happening. A client mentioned your town in a meeting, someone from the Department of Energy. When I said my father lived in Esperanza, the room got quiet. Then they changed the subject." Harmon's mind raced through possibilities. "Catherine, without alerting anyone, can you search for recent government filings about land usage or mineral rights near Esperanza?" 2 days later, she called from a prepaid phone. "Lithium deposits. Massive ones, recently discovered in the aquifer system that runs under Esperanza and extends south into Mexico. The government's keeping it quiet while they secure rights, but several energy companies are already positioning." The pieces fell into place. Lithium, essential for batteries, electric vehicles, energy storage. A strategic resource worth billions in the coming decades. The cartel wasn't just securing a smuggling route. They were positioning to control access to a vital national security resource. Harmon stood on his back porch that night, watching the stars emerge above the desert landscape he'd known since childhood. The town existed because of the water beneath it. Ranchers had settled here generations ago for the reliable wells. Now that same geological blessing had painted a target on Esperanza. Tomorrow, the town council would vote on replacing the sheriff's department. The moment required action, yet moving too soon would forfeit strategic advantage. Harmon made his decision and began preparations, starting with a secure call to Sheriff Martinez. The colonel who'd commanded elite units through 3 decades of conflict was about to embark on his most personal mission, the defense of home. The town council meeting erupted into chaos the moment the vote passed. 4-1 in favor of contracting Seguridad Frontera, the private security firm, to replace the sheriff's department. Only Councilwoman Gloria Herrera had voted against it, her solitary no nearly drowned out by Mayor Diaz's eager gavel confirming the decision. Harmon observed from the back row of the town hall, his expression neutral despite the anger burning in his chest. Sheriff Martinez stood rigid in his uniform near the side exit, jaw clenched as Mayor Diaz announced the exciting new chapter in Esperanza's security infrastructure. The room held barely 30 people, a fraction of the town's population, but enough to maintain the illusion of democratic process. The transition will be complete within 30 days, Mayor Diaz continued, avoiding Martinez's gaze. Seguridad Frontera comes highly recommended with experience securing communities throughout the Southwest. By whom? Gloria Herrera interrupted. The contract was presented yesterday. None of us had time to research this company. The recommendation came from multiple sources, Diaz replied smoothly, including state officials. A lie, Harmon noted. His contacts had confirmed no state agency endorsed this company. What happens to our deputies? Someone called from the audience. They'll be offered positions with Seguridad Frontera, of course, Diaz assured, at competitive salaries. Another lie. Harmon had seen the contract. Martinez had secretly photographed it, which specified bringing in external personnel. The meeting concluded with manufactured applause from several well-dressed strangers in the front row. As people filed out, Harmon noticed two men he didn't recognize photographing the crowd with their phones, cataloging faces, identifying potential resistance. Outside, the June heat shimmered off the asphalt. Harmon moved casually toward the hardware store, using parked cars as concealment from the photographers. Frank Wilson was waiting inside, along with the owners of 5 other businesses, the core of what Harmon now thought of as the resistance. It's happening faster than I expected, Harmon told them, closing the blinds. The security company takes over in 30 days. Once that happens, they control who comes in and out of Esperanza. They can't just lock down a town, Jose Reyes from the garage objected. This is America. They won't call it a lockdown, Harmon explained. They'll call it securing the community against external threats. Checkpoints for public safety. Registration of visitors for accountability. We've seen this playbook before in dozens of countries. What do we do? Asked Diana Chun, the pharmacist, whose inventory of chemicals would be valuable to any cartel operation. We prepare, Harmon replied, but carefully. Los Hierros operates differently than older cartels. They think strategically, preferring infiltration to confrontation. Right now, they believe they're moving unopposed. My brother in El Paso says they've taken over 3 communities across the border using the same method, Miguel Rivera said quietly. Private security first, then business partnerships, then complete control. Anyone who resists disappears. Harmon nodded. We have one advantage. They don't know we've identified their pattern. That gives us time to establish our own network. He outlined his initial strategy, documenting suspicious activities, creating secure communication channels, identifying safe houses, cataloging resources, and establishing evacuation routes. Each business owner would serve as a node in an information network while appearing to comply with the new order. What about weapons? Frank asked the question they were all considering. Legal firearms only, secured in your homes, Harmon emphasized. We're not forming a militia. We're establishing community resilience. If anyone asks, we're concerned about recent criminal activity and supporting each other as neighbors. As they dispersed, using different exits to avoid being seen together, Harmon sensed they had crossed a threshold. The town that had raised him was now contested territory. The stakes went beyond Esperanza. If Los Hierros secured control of the lithium deposits, they would gain leverage over a critical national resource. That night, 3 black SUVs with tinted windows parked on Main Street. Men in tactical pants and polo shirts bearing the Seguridad Frontera logo conducted what they called a security assessment, photographing buildings and infrastructure. Their leader, a square-jawed man who introduced himself as Vega, carried himself with military bearing. Harmon observed from his truck, parked strategically at the diner. Through binoculars, he noted details: the men's weapons partially concealed under jackets, their communication earpieces, their systematic coverage patterns. Not security consultants. Advanced reconnaissance. The following morning, Harmon found Sheriff Martinez waiting on his porch, expression grim. "They delivered my termination papers. Effective immediately, not 30 days, Martinez said, his badge noticeably absent from his civilian clothes. Deputies were told to turn in equipment by sundown or forfeit severance. "They're accelerating the timeline," Harmon noted. Something spooked them. "That energy company rep who visited last week," Martinez suggested. "She asked too many questions about property sales." Martinez handed Harmon a USB drive. Department records. Call logs, incident reports, property disputes from the past year. "Thought they might disappear once Seguridad takes over." Harmon accepted it with a nod. "What's your plan?" "Lisa and the kids are already in Colorado. I'm supposed to join them." Martinez hesitated. "But I've got 3 deputies who refused the Seguridad offer. Good men. Not leaving. They'll need to maintain low profiles," Harmon warned. "Los Hierros eliminates security risks methodically." "Like us," Martinez said with a grim smile. "Like us," Harmon agreed. After Martinez left, Harmon connected the USB to his encrypted laptop. The data confirmed his suspicions: a pattern of property acquisitions radiating outward from the Phillips Ranch, disputes mysteriously resolved in favor of new buyers, increasing reports of intimidation dismissed without investigation. The most revealing document was a geological survey filed 6 months earlier, detailing groundwater sampling throughout the county. The survey focused extensively on mineral content readings in Esperanza's aquifer, with particular attention to areas extending toward the Mexican border. Harmon's satellite phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Catherine. DOE finalizing acquisition plan for mineral rights. Timeline accelerated. Stay alert. The pieces aligned. The Department of Energy was moving to secure the lithium deposits, likely alerted by the same geological data Los Hierros had obtained. The cartel was racing to establish control before the federal government could act. That afternoon, Harmon drove the perimeter roads around Esperanza, plotting GPS coordinates on his handheld device. To any observer, he appeared to be an old man enjoying a countryside drive. In reality, he was mapping observation points, transit routes, and potential control zones, the same tactical assessment he'd conducted in conflict zones worldwide. As he crested a hill overlooking the town, Harmon spotted a convoy of 5 vehicles heading toward Esperanza from the south. 3 black SUVs identical to those from the previous night, followed by 2 larger tactical vehicles with reinforced frames. Rapid deployment. The transition wasn't waiting 30 days. Harmon accelerated back toward town, using back roads to avoid detection. He activated the emergency notification system he'd established, a cascade of text messages to key community members using coded language. Weather alert. Strong storm system approaching from south. Secure loose items. By the time he reached Main Street, Seguridad personnel were already establishing positions. Men in tactical gear unloaded equipment at the sheriff's office. Others placed mobile barricades at key intersections. A command center was being assembled in the vacant bank building. Vega stood directing operations, now openly wearing a sidearm. His eyes tracked Harmon's truck as it passed, his expression calculating. They hadn't met officially, but Harmon sensed Vega had already identified him as someone to watch. Harmon parked at the hardware store, where Frank Wilson was already enacting their contingency plan, distributing prepaid phones to trusted community members who entered the store for emergency supplies. Moving faster than we expected, Frank muttered as Harmon approached the counter. "They know something we don't," Harmon replied. "Or they're being pressured from above." Through the store window, they watched as Seguridad personnel instructed the town's sparse midday traffic to detour around the central square. Mayor Diaz stood nearby, gesturing enthusiastically as if showcasing improvements rather than witnessing an occupation. "What's our play, Colonel?" Frank asked quietly. "Observe and document. No confrontation. Tell our people to comply politely, but note everything. Personnel numbers, equipment, positions, routines." As dusk approached, Harmon drove home, hyper-aware of the two cigarette vehicles that followed at a distance, making no attempt to conceal their surveillance. A message, "We're watching you." He prepared dinner with deliberate normality while conducting a methodical sweep for surveillance devices. Finding none, he activated his satellite communication system and transmitted an encrypted situation update to former colleagues now working in border security agencies, individuals he trusted outside official channels. The response was immediate. Assets mobilizing. Maintain position. Avoid confrontation. Translation: federal attention was finally focusing on Esperanza, but help would take time. Until then, Harmon and his informal network were on their own. At 2,100 hours, precisely on schedule, Maria Vasquez walked past Harmon's house with her elderly dog, a nightly ritual that now served as their secure communication window. Harmon joined her casually, their conversation appearing to be neighborly small talk while they shared critical information. "The school's being converted to a community resource center," Maria reported. "They're setting up computers, satellite equipment." 8 men, all armed beneath their civilian clothes. "Command and control center," Harmon assessed. "Any unusual activity at the water treatment plant?" 2 technicians arrived claiming to be from the county. "Manager says he never requested maintenance." Another piece of the puzzle, securing water supply was standard procedure in territory control operations. Harmon had seen it in a dozen conflict zones. "Keep the emergency go bags ready," he reminded her. "If you hear the church bell at any unusual hour, execute the evacuation plan immediately." They parted ways as a Seguridad vehicle turned onto the street, its headlights sweeping across the modest homes. Over the next 3 days, Los Hierros consolidated control through their Seguridad front. Checkpoints appeared at town entrances, initially explained as traffic safety measures. Internet service experienced technical difficulties, leaving residents dependent on Seguridad-controlled connections. The water supply underwent quality testing, requiring a temporary shutdown managed by the new security team. Harmon's network documented everything, using the hardware store's delivery service to pass information. Martinez's former deputies, now posing as unemployed men seeking day labor, mapped Seguridad patrol patterns. Frank Wilson's teenage son photographed equipment deliveries using a drone disguised as a hobbyist toy. On the 4th morning, Harmon found his water and electricity cut off, a targeted pressure tactic. When he called the utility office, the apologetic clerk mentioned system upgrades affecting select neighborhoods that would be resolved once security protocols were reviewed. Rather than protest, Harmon adapted, activating the solar backup system he'd installed years earlier and drawing water from the emergency well on his property. The message to Vega was clear: "I'm prepared." That afternoon, a Seguridad vehicle parked directly in front of Harmon's house. 2 men remained inside, watching. A standard intimidation technique. Harmon responded by sitting on his porch cleaning his hunting rifle, a legal activity that sent his own message: "I'm not intimidated." At sunset, the confrontation Harmon had been anticipating finally arrived. A black SUV pulled into his driveway, and Vega emerged, now dressed in full tactical gear with a sidearm prominently displayed. 2 armed men flanked him at a respectful distance. "Colonel Harmon," Vega called out, his accent minimal but distinctive. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Harmon remained seated, the disassembled rifle parts arranged neatly on the table beside him. "You have me at a disadvantage, Mr. Vega. You know my name, but I don't recall an introduction." Commander Alejandro Vega, formerly of Mexican Special Forces, now head of regional security for Seguridad Frontera. He climbed the porch steps with calculated confidence. "Your reputation precedes you, Colonel." 3 decades with special operations. Author of several manuals on asymmetric warfare. A formidable record. Just a retired old man now, Harmon replied mildly, his hands continuing their methodical work on the rifle components. We both know that's not true. Vega smiled without warmth. Men like us don't retire. We just find new battlefields. Is that what Esperanza is to you? A battlefield? A community in transition, Vega corrected smoothly. One that requires professional security during uncertain times. Mayor Diaz has entrusted us with that responsibility. Seems like quite a response for a town of 2,000 people. The border region faces unique challenges. Desperate migrants, drug trafficking, potential terrorist infiltration. Vega's eyes narrowed slightly. Perhaps even valuable resources that require protection. So they knew about the lithium deposits, or at least suspected. Harmon kept his expression neutral as he reassembled the rifle's firing mechanism with practiced precision. I'm curious, Colonel, Vega continued. A man with your background chooses to live in a forgotten border town. Why? It's home, Harmon answered simply. Home, Vega repeated, as if examining an unfamiliar concept. Sentiment can be dangerous in our profession. Former profession, Harmon corrected. Of course. Vega gestured toward the American flag flying from Harmon's porch column. You're a patriot, I understand. I respect that. Patriotism drives many decisions, including yours. Something flickered in Vega's eyes, a hint of genuine response before his professional mask returned. My employers value security and prosperity. Their interests align with bringing stability to this region. By cutting off utilities to selected residents, Vega spread his hands apologetically. A regrettable technical issue that will be resolved once our security protocols are fully implemented. Which brings me to the purpose of my visit. He produced a document from his tactical vest. A community safety ordinance, approved this morning by the town council. All privately owned firearms must be registered with Seguridad Frontera within 48 hours. Harmon accepted the document without comment, scanning its contents. The ordinance appeared legally constructed but would never withstand constitutional challenge if there were functioning courts accessible to Esperanza's residents. Failure to comply will result in significant penalties, Vega added. For the community's protection, you understand. I understand perfectly, Harmon replied, completing the rifle's reassembly with a definitive click. I'll review this with appropriate attention. Vega's gaze lingered on the now functional rifle. I hope we can maintain a professional relationship, Colonel. Men with our experience should appreciate each other's capabilities. I always appreciate knowing who I'm dealing with, Harmon agreed, the double meaning clear between them. After Vega departed, Harmon photographed the document and transmitted it securely to Catherine, who would ensure it reached appropriate federal authorities. The ordinance proved what they had suspected. Los Hierros was accelerating their takeover timeline, moving from infiltration to overt control. That night, Harmon convened an emergency meeting of his core network, using the church basement where Father Rodriguez had disabled the newly installed security cameras during electrical maintenance. Sheriff Martinez attended with his 3 loyal deputies. Frank Wilson brought Miguel Rivera and Diana Chin. Maria Vesquez arrived last, visibly shaken. They've announced mandatory community identification cards for all residents, she reported. Children at school are being registered tomorrow, fingerprints, photographs, home addresses, family information. Data collection, Martinez noted grimly. Identifying family connections for leverage. Harmon spread a map of Esperanza across the table. They've established control faster than I anticipated. Checkpoints at all entry points. Communication systems compromised. Water and power under their management. Now weapons registration and population documentation. What about the federal authorities? Diana asked. Surely someone will intervene. Federal agencies are aware, Harmon confirmed. But jurisdiction issues and verification processes take time. Meanwhile, Los Hierros is creating facts on the ground. We need to decide, Martinez said, voicing what they were all thinking. Comply or resist. Harmon studied the faces around him. Ordinary people confronting extraordinary circumstances. Both, strategically. Visible compliance while establishing parallel systems. The goal isn't confrontation, it's endurance until help arrives. He outlined his immediate plan. Comply with registration requirements, but maintain secure weapons caches. Appear to accept identification systems while documenting seguridad operations. Establish emergency communication channels, and prepare evacuation routes for vulnerable residents. Most importantly, Harmon concluded, we need to break their information monopoly. The outside world needs to see what's happening here. Maria raised her hand tentatively. I might have a solution for that. The school's internet is on a separate system for educational purposes. It's still functioning, and I have access. Can you transmit video files without detection? Harmon asked. My classroom computer has that capability. They're monitoring content, but I know workarounds. Good. We need evidence. Clear documentation of armed checkpoints, weapons displayed within town limits, restricted movement of citizens. As they prepared to disperse in small groups to avoid detection, a rapid series of knocks on the basement door froze them in place. Father Rodriguez entered, his expression grave. Seguridad vehicles are conducting house searches on Mesquite Street. They claim to be looking for unregistered weapons. He paused. They've arrested the Morales family for resistance. The first civilian detentions. Another threshold crossed. Harmon made an immediate decision. Martinez, get your deputies to secure exit routes. Maria, prepare the school bus for potential evacuation. Frank, distribute the emergency supplies. Miguel, alert your family to prepare food packages. Diana, gather essential medical supplies. They moved with newfound urgency, the abstract threat now solidified into action. As Harmon helped Father Rodriguez extinguish the basement lights, the priest asked quietly, Is this still America, Colonel? Harmon thought of the flag flying above his porch, the only one still displayed in Esperanza. It is as long as we remember what that means. By midnight, Seguridad had detained 12 residents and established a processing center in the former sheriff's office. Vehicles with reinforced cages patrolled the streets, their spotlights sweeping across darkened homes. Announcements in English and Spanish reminded residents of the new curfew regulations. From his darkened living room, Harmon observed the patrol patterns, identifying gaps and timing. When the Seguridad vehicle monitoring his house finally departed to join a situation elsewhere, he moved immediately. Using the drainage culvert that ran behind his property, Harmon traversed half a mile without being detected, emerging near the elementary school where Maria waited. She led him to her classroom, where the independent internet connection remained active. Working quickly, they uploaded the evidence they'd gathered, photographs, video clips, documents, packaged with precise GPS coordinates and timestamps. Catherine had created a secure portal with her law firm where federal authorities could access the information without compromising their investigation. Will it be enough? Maria asked as the final files transmitted. It creates legal predicates for intervention, Harmon explained. But more importantly, it proves this isn't just happening in one direction. He pointed to the images of well-equipped, Seguridad personnel. Those aren't private security contractors. They're Los Hierros operatives with military training. As they prepared to leave, the school's external lights suddenly activated. Through the window, they saw 4 Seguridad vehicles surrounding the building. They must have detected the transmission, Maria whispered, fear evident in her voice. Harmon assessed their options with practiced efficiency. Alternative exit through the gymnasium. Stay close. As he moved toward the door, a voice called from the hallway, Vega's distinctive tone. Colonel Harmon, I know you're here. Let's handle this professionally. The encounter Harmon had been anticipating had arrived sooner than expected. Esperanza's resistance now faced its first direct confrontation. Take the emergency exit, Harmon whispered to Maria, pressing the classroom keys into her palm. Get to Father Rodriguez. Initiate Protocol Echo. What about you? Maria's eyes widened. I'll create a diversion. Go. Now. As Maria slipped through the supply closet toward the back exit, Harmon moved in the opposite direction. He'd memorized the school layout during his reading sessions with the children, knowledge that now served a different purpose. I'm unarmed, Commander Vega, Harmon called out, calculating distances and timing in his mind. Entering the hallway now. He stepped out with hands visible, facing Vega and 4 segregated operatives in tactical gear. Their weapons weren't aimed directly at him, but their posture made clear they were prepared for resistance. A retired colonel accessing school property after midnight, Vega observed. Quite suspicious. Just helping Ms. Vasquez prepare emergency materials for her students, Harmon replied evenly. Given the current atmosphere in town, she was concerned about the children's welfare. Vega's eyes narrowed. And where's Ms. Vasquez now? She left earlier. I stayed to finish organizing supplies. Interesting. Our thermal imaging detected 2 heat signatures in this building 5 minutes ago. Harmon maintained his composure. The heating system in this old building creates all kinds of anomalies. I'd be happy to show you the emergency kits we prepared. Vega gestured to 2 of his men. Search the building. Thoroughly. To Harmon, he added, you understand this is a curfew violation at minimum. You'll need to come with us for processing. Of course, Harmon agreed, knowing that each minute he kept Vega occupied gave Maria more distance. Though I'm curious about the legal jurisdiction of a private security company imposing curfews on American citizens. Something dangerous flickered in Vega's eyes. The town council granted us emergency powers given the deteriorating security situation. Powers that include detaining suspected agitators. 2 segregated men moved to flank Harmon, securing his arms with practiced efficiency and applying zip-tie restraints. The plastic bit into his wrists, unnecessarily tight, a deliberate discomfort tactic. As they escorted him outside, Harmon mentally calculated his resistance network's response timeline. Protocol Echo would activate emergency evacuation for key personnel and secure critical documentation. Maria would reach Father Rodriguez within 15 minutes. The church bell would sound for late-night prayers, the signal for all network members to implement their assigned emergency roles. Vega directed his men to place Harmon in the lead SUV. Through the vehicle's windows, Harmon observed the school's surroundings. 2 segregated operatives establishing a perimeter, others conducting a building search. No sign that they'd detected Maria's escape route. Inside the vehicle, Vega sat opposite Harmon, studying him with professional curiosity. You're remarkably calm for someone being detained. I've been in worse situations, Harmon replied. Yes, your file mentions several captivity scenarios during your career. Afghanistan, Colombia. Vega consulted a tablet. You even wrote the Army's enhanced resistance protocols for high-value personnel. Required reading at the academy. Harmon acknowledged, noting that Vega's intelligence was impressively detailed. Though I didn't expect to be implementing them in Texas. Times change, Vega said, his attention diverted by an incoming radio transmission. He listened, then gave a terse instruction in Spanish before returning his focus to Harmon. Your associate Ms. Vasquez appears to have evaded my men, he observed. Impressive for a schoolteacher, almost as if she had training. Most of Esperanza's residents are remarkably resourceful, Harmon replied. Frontier mentality. The SUV began moving toward the center of town, followed by the other segregated vehicles. Through the window, Harmon observed darkened houses, some with faint lights visible behind heavy curtains, residents awakened by the commotion but afraid to look outside. You should understand something, Colonel, Vega said, his voice conversational despite the circumstances. What's happening in Esperanza isn't personal. It's strategic necessity. The border region is evolving and certain interests require secure transit corridors. Interests like Los Hierros Cartel. Vega's expression remained neutral. Los Hierros is a simplistic label created by your media. The organization I represent operates more like a multinational corporation with diverse business interests, including lithium extraction. This time, Harmon's question elicited a reaction, a slight narrowing of Vega's eyes. You're well informed. Yes, natural resources are part of the strategic calculation. Resources your government has neglected until recently. The SUV turned onto Main Street, heading toward the former sheriff's office, now serving as Segredid's detention center. Harmon noted additional tactical vehicles had arrived since nightfall. The operation was expanding rapidly. Here's what puzzles me, Harmon said. Your organization has the resources to purchase mineral rights legally through shell corporations. Why risk a direct territorial acquisition in the United States? Because possession matters more than paper, Vega replied. When the resource wars intensify, actual control will determine outcomes. Your government understands this. They simply lack the operational courage to act accordingly. The vehicle stopped outside the detention center, where Harmon could see lights and movement inside. Through the windows, he glimpsed civilians seated in processing areas, their expressions reflecting confusion and fear. You're detaining American citizens without charges, Harmon observed. That won't go unnoticed forever. It's already going unnoticed, Vega countered. Your border communities have been essentially abandoned by federal authorities for years. By the time Washington responds meaningfully, we'll have established irreversible conditions. As Segredid personnel moved to extract Harmon from the vehicle, the night air suddenly filled with the resonant sound of church bells, Father Rodriguez implementing Protocol Echo on schedule. Vega's head snapped toward the sound, his expression darkening. Late-night prayers, Harmon explained innocently. Father Rodriguez is very dedicated. Vega barked orders to his team, clearly recognizing the timing was suspicious. 2 vehicles immediately departed toward the church. But Harmon knew the bell was just the beginning. Across Esperanza, his network was now activating predetermined countermeasures. Inside the detention center, Harmon was processed with methodical efficiency, photographed, fingerprinted, personal items confiscated. The facility had been transformed from a small-town sheriff's office into a paramilitary operations center within days. Monitors displayed surveillance feeds from throughout Esperanza. Communications equipment linked to mobile units. Armed personnel moved with practiced coordination. Harmon was placed in a holding cell that had once been a storage room. Through the small window in the door, he could observe the operations center where Vega now directed an intensified response to the church bell alarm. Radio communications indicated multiple suspicious activities occurring simultaneously throughout town, exactly as Harmon had planned. Protocol Echo wasn't just an evacuation procedure. It was designed to create controlled chaos. Frank Wilson would be distributing emergency radios from his hardware store's back entrance. Martinez's deputies would be disabling selected streetlights to complicate Segredid surveillance. Miguel Rivera's family restaurant would be accidentally triggering a kitchen fire alarm, drawing resources to the west side of town. Harmon settled onto the metal bench in his cell, mentally reviewing the resistance timeline. By dawn, vulnerable network members would be evacuated. Essential supplies would be relocated to secondary safe houses. Documentation of Segredid's illegal activities would be transmitted through Maria's school connection to Catherine and federal contacts. The cell door opened abruptly, and 2 Segredid operatives entered. Without speaking, they secured Harmon's arms and escorted him to an interrogation room where Vega waited. Your community appears remarkably coordinated for a random midnight emergency, Vega observed as Harmon was seated across from him. Almost as if they were following a predetermined protocol. Small towns pull together in crises, Harmon replied. Always have. Vega placed a tablet on the table, displaying thermal imagery of Esperanza with multiple movement patterns highlighted. This isn't spontaneous community response. This is a coordinated resistance operation with classic asymmetric characteristics. His expression hardened. Your characteristics, Colonel. You're seeing patterns where none exist, Harmon countered. People are scared because armed men have taken over their town and are detaining their neighbors without cause. We'll discuss causality shortly, Vega said, activating an audio recorder. This is Commander Alejandro Vega, security consultation number 267 Echo. Subject interview commencing at 0147 hours. What followed was a methodical interrogation focused on Harmon's knowledge of Esperanza's infrastructure, community leadership, and communication systems. Vega's approach was professional rather than brutal, psychological pressure rather than physical force. His questions revealed the operation's priorities, identifying resistance networks, locating resources, cataloging potential opposition. Harmon provided selective cooperation, factual information Vega could verify elsewhere, vague responses to sensitive questions, occasional redirections to establish credibility. It was a technique he'd taught to military personnel preparing for potential capture. Measure your resistance, conserve mental energy, reveal nothing of operational value. As the interrogation progressed, Harmon noticed increasing radio traffic outside the room, segregated units reporting multiple incidents across town. Protocol Echo was working as designed, stretching their resources and creating confusion. Your Esperanza neighbors seem remarkably uncooperative tonight, Vega noted, responding to another transmission. Multiple power outages, communication disruptions. Even the water pressure has inexplicably dropped. Old infrastructure, Harmon suggested. The town council has neglected maintenance for years. Vega's expression indicated he wasn't fooled. Infrastructure that functioned perfectly until our arrival, then simultaneously fails the night you're apprehended conducting unauthorized communications. He leaned forward. You've prepared this community for resistance, Colonel. Impressive, but ultimately futile. A sharp knock interrupted them. A segregated operative entered with urgent information, speaking rapidly in Spanish. Harmon, whose language skills extended to basic Spanish, caught fragments, federal vehicles, highway checkpoint, credentials. Vega's expression remained controlled, but Harmon detected the subtle tension that indicated operational complications. The commander issued crisp instructions before returning his attention to Harmon. It seems your activities have attracted outside attention, Vega observed. Border Patrol agents are requesting access to Esperanza for a routine inspection. American law enforcement requesting entry to an American town, Harmon noted. Hardly seems controversial. The town council has temporarily restricted access due to a public health concern, Vega countered smoothly. Standard protocol during security transitions. Is that what you're calling this occupation? Vega ignored the question, studying Harmon with renewed calculation. Your detention has triggered contingency protocols sooner than anticipated. That suggests external communication capabilities we haven't identified. Harmon remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. It's a tactical error, Vega continued. Forcing us to accelerate our timeline will only increase the pressure on your community. Sometimes patience is the better approach. I found that depends entirely on the objective, Harmon replied. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Vega's professional facade. The commander was recalibrating, recognizing that Harmon's detention might have been anticipated, even planned for, as part of a larger strategy. Harmon's military career had taught him that tactical exchanges often hinged on unexpected variables. In Afghanistan, his unit had once deliberately triggered an insurgent response to reveal their communication patterns. In Colombia, he'd used his own visible presence to distract attention from a flanking operation. Now, in Esperanza, his detention was serving a similar function, occupying Segreded's leadership while his network implemented critical measures. The interrogation room door opened again. This time, Mayor Diaz entered, his usual confidence visibly diminished. "Commander, we have a situation," Diaz said, glancing nervously at Harmon. "Border Patrol is insisting on access, citing suspicious reports of armed personnel detaining American citizens." "Handle it," Vega instructed curtly. "Explain the public health protocol." "They're not accepting that explanation," Diaz responded, sweat visible on his forehead despite the room's cool temperature. They have federal warrants based on potential civil rights violations. The dynamic in the room shifted perceptibly. Vega's attention was now divided between the immediate tactical situation and its broader implications. "Secure the subject," he ordered the guards, indicating Harmon. "Mayor Diaz, implement contingency protocol Bravo immediately." As the guards moved to escort Harmon back to the holding cell, Vega added, "This interruption changes nothing, Colonel. It merely adjusts our timeline." "Timelines matter in asymmetric confrontations," Harmon replied, "as does public visibility." In the holding cell, Harmon could hear increased activity throughout the detention center. Rapid movement, equipment being relocated, documents secured. Contingency Protocol Bravo appeared to involve reducing visible footprint while maintaining operational capability, a standard response when unwanted official attention threatened to expose unauthorized activities. Through his cell window, Harmon observed Segregated personnel changing from tactical gear into civilian clothes and standard security uniforms. Weapons were being secured in locked cases rather than openly displayed. The paramilitary appearance was transforming into something more appropriate for a private security contractor, a hasty cosmetic adaptation. An hour passed with Harmon monitoring the activity outside his cell. The facility's atmosphere had shifted from confident control to tense vigilance. Radio communications were now conducted in hushed tones, often switching to encrypted channels that Harmon couldn't overhear. When the cell door finally opened, Harmon was surprised to see Sheriff Martinez in his old uniform, accompanied by 2 Border Patrol agents. "Colonel Harmon," Martinez said formally, "these federal officers would like to speak with you about your detention." The Border Patrol agents introduced themselves, Agent Rodriguez and Agent Whitman, and explained they were responding to reports of unauthorized detention activities in Esperanza. "We've received concerning documentation," Rodriguez explained as they escorted Harmon from the cell, "including evidence of armed checkpoints restricting citizen movement and detentions without legal basis. Mayor Diaz claims these were temporary security measures during a transition period," Whitman added skeptically. "Can you describe what you experienced?" As they moved toward the exit, Harmon noticed Vega observing from the operations center, his expression unreadable. Seguridad personnel maintained professional distance, now presenting as conventional security contractors rather than paramilitary forces. Outside, the situation had visibly changed. Border Patrol vehicles were positioned at strategic locations throughout downtown Esperanza. Federal agents were interviewing detained citizens who had been hastily released when Border Patrol arrived. The Seguridad checkpoint at the town entrance had been replaced by official law enforcement presence. "This response seems well-coordinated," Harmon observed to the agents as they reached their vehicle. "We've been monitoring suspicious activities in this region for weeks," Rodriguez replied, "but lacked actionable intelligence until recently." "Very recently," Whitman added meaningfully. "As in, detailed documentation uploaded approximately 3 hours ago from this location." Maria had succeeded in transmitting the evidence. The federal response, while not overwhelming, was at least establishing presence and visibility, exactly what Los Hierros wanted to avoid during their acquisition phase. "The situation is more complex than it appears," Harmon explained as they drove toward the Border Patrol command vehicle. Seguridad Frontera is a front organization for Los Hierros Cartel. Their objective is territorial control of Esperanza to secure access to lithium deposits recently discovered in the aquifer system. The agents exchanged glances. "That aligns with intelligence assessments," Rodriguez confirmed, "but proves difficult to verify through traditional channels. The organizational barriers between Seguridad and Los Hierros are deliberately complex. What we need is conclusive evidence linking them directly," Whitman added. "Without it, we're limited to temporary intervention based on civil rights concerns." Harmon understood the implication. Border Patrol could interrupt Seguridad's operation temporarily, But without definitive proof of cartel involvement, they couldn't sustain a permanent presence or make arrests beyond immediate civil rights violations. What's the current operational status? Harmon asked. We've established presence in Esperanza under federal authority, Rodriguez explained. Seguridad personnel are cooperating superficially while Mayor Diaz is contacting state officials claiming jurisdictional overreach. Meanwhile, Whitman continued, we've documented the detention facility, interviewed released detainees, and cataloged weapons and equipment. But Seguridad is rapidly adapting, reducing visible footprint, modifying operations to appear more consistent with legitimate security contractors. They arrived at the Border Patrol command vehicle, where Sheriff Martinez was coordinating with federal officers. The church bell was visible in the distance, its tower now illuminated. Father Rodriguez's signal that Protocol Echo had been successfully completed. Inside the command vehicle, Harmon was briefed on the broader situation. Border Patrol had established a perimeter around Esperanza, but lacked the personnel and jurisdiction for complete control. State authorities had been notified, but were moving cautiously given the political sensitivities involved. Federal agencies with broader authority were assembling response teams, but deployment would take time. We've created a window, Agent Rodriguez summarized. But without conclusive evidence linking Seguridad to Los Hierros and illegal activities, that window will close. They'll adapt, create legal justifications, and continue their operation in modified form. Harmon recognized the tactical reality. The initial intervention had interrupted Seguridad's timeline, but not their strategic objective. Los Hierros operated with sophisticated legal barriers between their criminal enterprise and front organizations, barriers designed specifically to complicate law enforcement response. I need to communicate with my network, Harmon said. We've been documenting Seguridad's activities systematically. There may be evidence we haven't yet transmitted. Martinez provided a secure radio linked to the Resistance Network's emergency channel. Within minutes, Harmon had re-established contact with key members who confirmed Protocol Echo's completion. Vulnerable personnel evacuated, documentation secured, supply caches established. Frank Wilson reported from his observation post near the Phillips Ranch that Seguridad personnel were relocating equipment and materials, adapting to the federal presence by reducing visible operations. They're not leaving, Frank emphasized. Just going underground until this blows over. Maria Vasquez, now safely at Father Rodriguez's sister's home in the next county, confirmed she had transmitted all documented evidence. But it's mostly circumstantial, she added. Nothing directly connecting Seguridad to Los Hierros' leadership. Harmon considered their options. Border Patrol's intervention had created temporary breathing room, but without conclusive evidence, Los Hierros would simply adjust tactics, perhaps becoming more careful, possibly more aggressive. Dawn was approaching, casting long shadows across Esperanza as Harmon joined Martinez, Rodriguez, and Whitman in assessing their tactical position. The town remained effectively contested territory, federal presence established but limited, Seguridad's control interrupted but not eliminated. What happens when you leave? Martinez asked the Border Patrol agents directly. Without actionable evidence of ongoing federal crimes, we'll be required to withdraw within 72 hours, Rodriguez admitted. State authorities might maintain presence longer, but jurisdictional challenges would likely force their withdrawal as well. And then Seguridad returns to full operational status, Harmon concluded. With valuable lessons about avoiding federal attention. The tactical challenge was clear. They needed to convert temporary interruption into permanent intervention. That required evidence that could sustain federal jurisdiction, direct links between Seguridad Frontera and Los Hierros Cartel, documentation of illegal activities beyond civil rights concerns, proof of the operation's true objective. Harmon's tactical mind assessed potential sources for such evidence. Seguridad's command center in the former sheriff's office would contain valuable intelligence but was now under heightened security. The Phillips Ranch facility might hold documentation of their mineral extraction plans, but would be similarly protected. Mayor Diaz likely possessed incriminating communications, but would have secured or destroyed them when federal authorities arrived. The solution emerged as Harmon recalled his initial surveillance of Vega. The commander carried a tactical tablet that appeared to contain operational data, the same tablet he'd consulted during Harmon's interrogation. Commander Vega maintains critical operational data on a secured device, Harmon informed the agents. Based on observed protocols, that device likely contains communication records, operational directives, and organizational structures, possibly including direct links to Los Hierros leadership. We can't seize it without probable cause specific to that device, Whitman cautioned. And even with proper warrants, encryption would likely prevent immediate access. We don't need to seize it, Harmon replied, formulating a plan that drew on his decades of asymmetric warfare experience. We need to access it while it's in active use and transmitting data. Martinez understood immediately. Create a situation where Vega needs to access secured information while within range of signals intelligence equipment. Exactly, Harmon confirmed. Force him to communicate with his superiors about a significant development, one requiring authorization codes or operational guidance from above. What kind of development would necessitate that level of communication? Rodriguez asked. Harmon's expression hardened as he considered options. A direct threat to their strategic objective, something that would force Vega to seek immediate guidance from Los Hierros leadership. The tactical discussion continued as sunlight gradually illuminated Esperanza. Throughout the town, citizens were emerging cautiously from their homes, witnessing the unexpected presence of federal authorities. Some approached Border Patrol agents with information about Seguridad's activities over the past week. Others remained distant, uncertain whether the intervention would last. At the former sheriff's office, now serving as Seguridad's command center, Commander Vega observed the changing situation with professional calculation. Through binoculars, he monitored federal positions, assessed personnel numbers, and evaluated response capabilities. Mayor Diaz arrived, visibly agitated. "This is a disaster," he hissed. Federal agents interviewing townspeople, documenting everything. They're collecting witness statements about the detentions. "Calm yourself," Vega instructed coldly. Border Patrol's jurisdiction is limited and temporary. Without evidence of federal crimes, they'll withdraw soon enough. And if they find such evidence, they won't, Vega assured him. Our operation is compartmentalized specifically to prevent such discoveries. The connection between Seguridad Frontera and our parent organization exists only through secure communications that leave no trace. His confidence was justified by experience. Los Hierros had conducted similar operations throughout the border region, establishing control through front organizations while maintaining legal separation from criminal enterprises. When authorities intervened, they simply adapted, reducing visibility, adjusting timelines, maintaining strategic objectives while modifying tactical approaches. What Vega didn't fully appreciate was the nature of his opponent. Colonel James Harmon had spent decades countering similar compartmentalized operations in conflict zones worldwide. His specialty wasn't direct confrontation, but systematic undermining of enemy infrastructure, identifying critical vulnerabilities, creating pressure points, forcing errors that revealed hidden connections. As Vega continued coordinating Seguridad's modified presence in Esperanza, Harmon was implementing a response drawing on that lifetime of experience. The tactical chessboard was set. The next moves would determine whether Esperanza remained under American governance or became Los Hierros' first territorial acquisition on U.S. soil. The operational plan took shape at dawn in the church basement. Harmon stood before a hastily assembled tactical map of Esperanza, surrounded by Sheriff Martinez, Border Patrol agents Rodriguez and Whitman, and core members of his resistance network. Outside, the first rays of sunlight illuminated a town now divided between Seguridad's diminished but still significant presence, and federal authorities establishing temporary jurisdiction. Vega's security protocols require him to maintain communication with Los Hierros leadership through encrypted channels, Harmon explained, indicating the former sheriff's office where Segredid maintained their command center. But those communications are designed to avoid detection or interception. Standard cartel procedure, Agent Rodriguez confirmed. They've developed sophisticated systems after years of DEA operations against their networks. The key, Harmon continued, is forcing emergency communications that bypass normal security protocols. When faced with crisis requiring immediate guidance, even disciplined operators revert to contingency systems with reduced security. We need to threaten their primary objective, Martinez concluded. The lithium deposits. Exactly, Harmon confirmed. Our intelligence indicates Los Hierros' strategic interest is securing control of the aquifer system containing those deposits. If that control appears directly threatened, Vega will be forced to seek immediate guidance from superiors. Harmon outlined his proposed operation, a coordinated effort combining Border Patrol's legal authority, the Resistance Network's local knowledge, and tactical deception techniques he'd refined through decades of special operations. The target is Vega's communications, not Vega himself, Harmon emphasized. We need to create circumstances where he transmits authenticating data that reveals the command structure above him. Agent Whitman indicated the specialized equipment they'd brought. We have signal intelligence capabilities that can capture transmissions within limited range, but we'd need Vega to use specific frequencies and protocols. He will, Harmon assured them. When faced with a crisis that threatens their entire operation, the plan required precise timing and coordination. Border Patrol would establish a visible presence at the Phillips Ranch facility, the suspected center of Los Hierros' mineral extraction planning. Simultaneously, Martinez's deputies would secure the water treatment plant, appearing to implement federal testing protocols. Frank Wilson's hardware store would receive an unusually large delivery of drilling equipment, creating the impression of countermeasures against mineral extraction. Most critically, Catherine would ensure Department of Energy representatives arrived visibly in Esperanza, conducting official surveys with federal escorts. The scenario we're creating, Harmon explained, is federal intervention specifically targeting the lithium deposits. Vega will be forced to determine whether to withdraw, confront federal authorities directly, or seek new operational directives. And that decision requires communication with Los Hierros leadership, Rodriguez concluded. Communication that will need to include authentication codes, operational details, and hierarchical confirmation, Harmon confirmed. All transmitted through emergency channels when Vega believes standard communications may be compromised. As the team dispersed to implement their roles, Harmon remained in the church basement with Martinez, reviewing contingencies. The tactical situation remained precarious. Border Patrol's presence was temporary. Segredid still controlled key infrastructure, and Los Hierros had extensive resources to adapt to changing circumstances. This is a sophisticated operation against a professional adversary, Harmon acknowledged. The margin for error is minimal. Just like old times, Martinez observed with a grim smile. Except we're defending American soil. That changes everything. Harmon agreed, his expression hardening. They're not just occupying territory, they're attacking our home. By mid-morning, the operation was in motion. Border Patrol vehicles approached the Phillips Ranch with visible purpose, establishing perimeter positions and deploying monitoring equipment. Martinez and his deputies secured the water treatment plant, conducting ostentatious testing procedures. Frank Wilson's hardware store received a shipment of industrial drilling components, unloaded conspicuously in full view of Segredid surveillance. Harmon observed from distance, stationed in Father Rodriguez's bell tower with binoculars and communications equipment. Through secure channel, Agent Rodriguez confirmed signal intelligence assets were in position, prepared to intercept communications from Seguridad's command center. The first indication of success came when Seguridad vehicles rapidly deployed toward each location, establishing observation positions. Through high-powered lenses, Harmon watched Vega personally inspect the border patrol operation at the Phillips Ranch, his body language revealing increasing concern. "Target is responding," Harmon reported through encrypted channel. Moving to Phase 2. Phase 2 initiated when a government SUV with Department of Energy markings arrived at the town hall, accompanied by federal escorts. Two officials in formal attire emerged, carrying documentation cases and surveying equipment. Their presence was deliberate theater. Catherine had arranged their arrival through contacts in the energy sector, creating the impression of federal mineral rights assessment. From his observation post, Harmon tracked Vega's movements as the commander returned rapidly to Seguridad's command center. Thermal imaging provided by Border Patrol's surveillance team showed increased activity inside the building. Personnel moving with urgency, equipment being activated. Command center shows elevated communication signatures, Agent Whitman reported through secure channel. Multiple devices activating on encrypted frequencies. The operation's critical moment approached. For signal intelligence to capture usable data, Vega needed to employ emergency protocols that sacrifice security for immediacy, the type of communication only justified by direct threat to their strategic objective. Harmon initiated the final phase. Using the church's restored sound system, Father Rodriguez broadcast an announcement audible throughout downtown Esperanza. "Attention citizens, federal authorities have identified contamination concerns in the aquifer system. All water usage is temporarily suspended pending Environmental Protection Agency assessment of subsurface mineral anomalies." The announcement was technically accurate. Catherine had arranged for EPA involvement, but deliberately framed to suggest federal discovery and intervention regarding the lithium deposits. Through thermal imaging, Harmon observed Vega's reaction within the command center, rapid movement toward communications equipment, personnel gathering for emergency consultation. The commander was facing exactly the crisis scenario the operation had designed. Apparent federal discovery and intervention targeting Los Hierros' primary objective. "Signal activity spiking," Whitman reported excitedly. "Emergency protocol transmissions detected. Encryption patterns consistent with cartel leadership communications. Maintain position," Harmon instructed. "We need authenticated command responses, not just outgoing transmissions." Minutes passed with tense anticipation. The tactical situation remained balanced on a knife's edge. If Vega suspected deception, he might revert to secure communication protocols. If Los Hierros' leadership recognized the potential trap, they might refuse to respond through compromised channels. Multiple response transmissions detected, Whitman suddenly reported. Authentication sequences identified. Recording complete data packages. Harmon allowed himself momentary satisfaction. Decades of experience in asymmetric warfare had taught him that even disciplined adversaries could be forced into predictable responses when their primary objectives were threatened. The operation's next phase depended on Border Patrol's technical specialists extracting actionable intelligence from the intercepted communications. Harmon maintained observation as Seguridad personnel implemented what appeared to be contingency protocols, repositioning assets, securing equipment, establishing defensive positions around key infrastructure. At the Phillips Ranch, Seguridad operatives were retrieving materials from hidden storage areas, removing evidence before federal authorities could secure it. Similar activity was visible at the water treatment plant and other locations throughout Esperanza. "They're implementing withdrawal protocols," Harmon observed, "securing evidence and preparing fallback positions. Standard cartel response when compromised," Rodriguez confirmed. "They'll abandon the overt operation while maintaining covert capability." An hour later, initial analysis of the intercepted communications confirmed their success. The transmissions contained direct links between Seguridad Frontera and Los Hierros leadership, including operational codes, financial transfers, and explicit references to mineral extraction objectives. Most critically, the communications included authentication data that conclusively established the connection federal authorities had previously been unable to prove. This gives us justification for expanded federal intervention, Agent Rodriguez confirmed, reviewing the preliminary intelligence. DEA and FBI have legal predicate for direct involvement now. How quickly can they deploy? Martinez asked, the critical question that would determine whether their temporary advantage could be converted into permanent security. Teams are already mobilizing from El Paso and San Antonio, Rodriguez replied. But full operational presence is still 2,448 hours away. The tactical challenge remained, maintaining pressure on Seguridad during the gap between initial intervention and full federal response. Los Hierros had proven adaptable in previous operations. When confronted with law enforcement pressure, they typically withdrew visible assets while maintaining covert presence, prepared to resume operations when attention diminished. We need to keep them reactive rather than proactive, Harmon concluded, drawing on counterinsurgency principles he'd implemented across multiple theaters. Continual pressure on multiple fronts, denying them opportunity to consolidate or re-establish position. The strategy materialized as coordinated operations throughout Esperanza. Border Patrol expanded their presence at critical infrastructure locations. Martinez and his deputies conducted visible security patrols. The resistance network implemented community monitoring systems, ensuring no area remained unobserved. Federal authorities initiated formal investigations at the town hall, securing documentation and electronic records. By mid-afternoon, Seguridad's position had visibly deteriorated. Their checkpoint at the town entrance was abandoned. Personnel had changed from tactical uniforms to civilian attire. Vehicles were being relocated to less conspicuous positions. Mayor Diaz appeared increasingly isolated, his authority undermined by the federal presence. From his observation post, Harmon tracked Vega's movements as the commander attempted to maintain operational coherence amid deteriorating circumstances. The professional discipline remained evident in Seguridad's activities, but their strategic position had fundamentally shifted from offense to defense. The weather changed suddenly as thunderclouds gathered over Esperanza, an unexpected summer storm building across the desert landscape. Within an hour, heavy rain hammered the town, reducing visibility and complicating surveillance operations. Lightning flashed across darkened skies, followed by rumbling thunder that reverberated through the church tower where Harmon maintained his observation post. Through rain-streaked binoculars, Harmon observed unusual activity at Seguridad's command center. Vehicles were being loaded with equipment despite the downpour. Personnel moved with renewed urgency, implementing what appeared to be evacuation procedures rather than tactical repositioning. Something's changed, Harmon reported through secure channel. They're initiating full withdrawal, not just tactical adjustment. The intercepted communications had likely revealed more than just connections between Seguridad and Los Hierros. The cartel leadership had apparently assessed the situation and determined Esperanza was no longer viable as an acquisition target, at least through current methods. Border Patrol surveillance confirmed the assessment. Seguridad personnel were departing in civilian vehicles, moving southward in small groups rather than organized convoys. Equipment was being hastily transferred to unmarked vans. The command center was being systematically cleared of evidence. Amid the storm's intensifying fury, Harmon recognized the tactical opportunity. Los Hierros was implementing standard disengagement protocols, removing personnel and equipment while eliminating evidence of their operation. The weather provided natural cover for their withdrawal, reducing visibility and complicating intervention. We need to document this withdrawal, Harmon instructed through secure channels. Maintaining continuous surveillance is critical for future prosecution. Border Patrol assets adjusted accordingly, implementing weather-adaptive tracking systems and positioning personnel to maintain observation despite limited visibility. The storm had introduced new tactical variables, but also provided unexpected advantage. Seguridad's hasty withdrawal meant increased probability of mistakes, overlooked evidence, and tactical compromises. From his elevated position, Harmon observed a black SUV departing the command center, Vega personally supervising the final evacuation phase. The commander's vehicle moved with deliberate purpose toward the southern exit, followed by two support vehicles maintaining professional security protocols despite the deteriorating conditions. Primary target moving south on Mesquite Road, Harmon reported. Appears to be implementing command extraction. Intercept teams in position, Rodriguez confirmed. Authorization to detain still pending. The tactical situation had reached critical decision point. Federal authorities had sufficient evidence to justify intervention but remained constrained by jurisdictional procedures. If Vega escaped across county lines, the opportunity to apprehend a key Los Hierros operative might be lost. Lightning illuminated the rain-drenched landscape as Harmon made his decision. Drawing on decades of operational experience, he recognized moments when procedural constraints must yield to tactical necessity. "I'm implementing direct interdiction," he informed Martinez through secure channel, already moving toward the church stairs. "Delay Vega's extraction until federal authorization arrives." "Understood," Martinez replied without hesitation, their military shorthand requiring no elaboration. "Assets positioning now." Within minutes, Harmon had reached his truck parked behind the church, rain hammering against the windshield as he navigated towards southern Esperanza. Through urgent coordination with Martinez, a hasty roadblock was established using civilian vehicles positioned to appear as accident debris, a tactic Harmon had employed in similar operations when conventional resources were unavailable. The storm's intensity provided both challenge and opportunity. Reduced visibility complicated positioning, but also limited Seguridad's ability to detect the improvised obstruction. Thunder masked the sounds of preparation as Harmon and Martinez's deputies established positions near the roadblock, creating the impression of civilians responding to weather-related emergency rather than tactical interdiction. Harmon positioned his truck at calculated angle, headlights illuminating the rain-slicked road, where debris now prevented direct passage. As Vega's convoy approached, the lead vehicle slowed cautiously, security protocols evident in their methodical assessment before attempting to navigate the obstruction. The tactical moment arrived with precision Harmon had refined through countless similar operations. As Vega's vehicle slowed to maneuver around the debris, Martinez's deputies activated emergency lights from concealed positions, creating the impression of official response to the road condition. Vega's security training was evident in his immediate reaction. His vehicle accelerated sharply, attempting to bypass the obstruction rather than engage with unidentified personnel. The rain-slicked road compromised traction, causing the SUV to slide momentarily before the driver regained control. Harmon had anticipated this response, positioning his truck to provide limited passage that would naturally channel Vega's vehicle toward the prepared interception point. As the SUV accelerated through the narrowed route, Border Patrol vehicles emerged from concealed positions, their official lights and sirens providing unambiguous identification. What followed demonstrated the professional discipline that had made Vega an effective commander. Rather than attempting to evade federal authorities, an action that would justify immediate intervention, he instructed his driver to comply with the official stop. The SUV pulled to controlled halt as supporting vehicles maintained security positions, neither surrendering tactical advantage nor providing justification for escalated response. Through rain-streaked windshield, Harmon observed Vega's calculated compliance as Border Patrol agents approached the vehicle. The commander presented identification and documentation with professional courtesy, maintaining the fiction that Seguridad Frontera was merely a private security contractor concluding its contract with Esperanza. The tactical balance remained precarious. Border Patrol had authority to temporarily detain but not arrest without specific federal authorization, still working through bureaucratic channels despite the intercepted communications providing justification. Harmon moved his truck closer to the scene, maintaining civilian appearance while positioning for potential intervention if Vega attempted to leverage the jurisdictional limitations. Through tactical headset, he received Martinez's update. Federal authorization still pending. Estimated 13 minutes. 13 minutes during which Vega might successfully argue for release under existing jurisdictional constraints. 13 minutes in which the weather provided cover for supporting segregated personnel to implement contingency extraction. Lightning flashed across the darkened landscape, momentarily illuminating the scene in stark relief, Border Patrol agents examining documentation, Vega maintaining professional composure, support vehicles positioned for potential response. The storm's intensity increased, rain hammering against vehicles and reducing visibility to tactical minimum. Harmon assessed options with the calculated precision developed through decades of similar situations. Direct intervention would compromise the legal foundation being established for federal jurisdiction. Passive observation risked losing a critical Los Hierros operative if jurisdictional issues prevented immediate detention. The solution emerged from tactical creativity rather than direct confrontation. Through secure channel, Harmon instructed Martinez to implement Protocol Charlie, an adaptation of deception techniques they had employed in previous operations. Within minutes, emergency vehicles approached from northern Esperanza, lights flashing through the downpour. An official-appearing convoy created the impression of reinforcements arriving, their presence suggesting expanded federal response rather than limited Border Patrol jurisdiction. The psychological impact was immediate and measurable. Vega's support vehicles repositioned defensively, their tactical options suddenly constrained by the apparent force escalation. Even experienced commanders adjusted calculations when operational parameters shifted unexpectedly. Through thermal imaging provided by Border Patrol's surveillance team, Harmon observed increased communication among segregated personnel, radio transmissions spiking as they assessed the changing situation. Vega himself remained outwardly composed, professional training evident in his controlled responses to Border Patrol questioning. Federal authorization received. Martinez's voice suddenly announced through tactical channel. Full intervention approved. DEA assuming operational control. The tactical dynamics shifted immediately. Border Patrol agents implemented formal detention protocols, securing Vega and his immediate security team. Supporting segregated vehicles attempted controlled withdrawal but found routes blocked by positioned assets, a containment strategy Harmon had implemented throughout the operational planning. Lightning illuminated the scene as federal agents secured the Los Hierros commander who had nearly succeeded in establishing cartel control over an American town. Rain continued falling as Vega was transferred to federal custody, his professional facade finally showing cracks as he recognized the operation's comprehensive failure. Harmon remained positioned near his truck, maintaining civilian appearance while observing the detention procedures. After 3 decades commanding military operations against similar adversaries, there was professional satisfaction in seeing tactical planning culminate in successful execution. As federal personnel secured the scene despite the continuing storm, Harmon received communication from Agent Rodriguez. Preliminary analysis confirms direct links to Los Hierros leadership. Vega's position in cartel hierarchy verified through authentication codes. Operation successfully compromised. The tactical success extended beyond Vega's detention. Throughout Esperanza, coordinated federal operations were securing evidence of Los Hierros' attempted territorial acquisition, documentation from the command center, equipment from the Phillips Ranch, communications devices from segregated personnel. The hasty withdrawal had left substantial evidence that might otherwise have been systematically removed. By evening, the storm had passed, leaving Esperanza drenched but fundamentally transformed. Federal authorities maintain presence throughout the town, their jurisdiction now established through conclusive evidence linking Seguridad Frontera to Los Hierros cartel. Mayor Diaz had been taken into federal custody, his collaboration with criminal enterprise documented through recovered communications. From his porch, Harmon observed the changed landscape, border patrol vehicles positioned where Seguridad checkpoints had stood, federal agents securing evidence where cartel operatives had implemented occupation, community members emerging with renewed confidence where fear had recently dominated. Sheriff Martinez joined him as darkness fell, resuming his official role now that federal authorities had invalidated the town council's security contract with Seguridad Frontera. Federal task force is establishing permanent presence, Martinez reported, satisfaction evident in his voice. DEA, FBI, Homeland Security, coordinated response focused on lithium deposits and border security. Los Hierros won't abandon their objective entirely. Harmon cautioned, professional experience tempering tactical success with strategic reality. They'll adapt methods, revise timeline, develop alternative approaches. But they've lost operational security, Martinez noted. Their methods are documented, their personnel identified, their objectives exposed. And most importantly, Harmon added, they've lost the element of surprise. The community is aware and prepared. As night settled over Esperanza, Harmon considered the operation's broader implications. Los Hierros had attempted something unprecedented: territorial acquisition within the United States using sophisticated infiltration rather than conventional criminal activity. Their strategy had nearly succeeded through methodical implementation and professional discipline. The threat hadn't been eliminated, merely disrupted. Cartel operations adapted rather than disappeared when faced with setbacks. But critical advantage had been established: federal awareness, community vigilance, documented methods that would inform future countermeasures. Most significantly, Esperanza had demonstrated effective resistance through coordinated community response. Harmon's experience in asymmetric warfare had proven applicable to homeland defense when citizens united against external threat. The resistance network he'd established had provided critical capabilities when conventional security systems proved vulnerable to infiltration. The American flag remained flying from Harmon's porch as it had throughout the confrontation. In the distance, he could see other flags being raised across Esperanza, citizens reclaiming their community identity after the attempted occupation. Federal authorities would maintain presence for weeks, securing evidence and establishing enhanced security protocols. The lithium deposits would receive national security designation, ensuring federal oversight of resource development. Los Hierros would face intensified scrutiny throughout the border region, their operational methods compromised by the evidence secured in Esperanza. For Harmon personally, the operation represented unexpected application of capabilities developed through military career. The asymmetric warfare principles he'd implemented in distant conflict zones had proven directly relevant to defending American community against sophisticated threat. The strategic thinking he'd taught to military personnel had enabled civilian resistance against criminal enterprise attempting territorial control. Perhaps most meaningfully, the community had demonstrated fundamental American principles: self-organization against external threat, coordinated resistance to unauthorized authority, defense of constitutional governance against criminal enterprise. Citizens with diverse backgrounds and capabilities had united in effective response when their community faced existential challenge. As Martinez departed to resume his official duties, Harmon remained on his porch, professional assessment gradually yielding to personal reflection. The tactical confrontation had concluded successfully, but its significance extended beyond operational metrics. Esperanza, the town where he'd been raised, the community he'd returned to in retirement, had faced existential threat and emerged stronger through resistance. The tactical expertise he'd developed through military career had found meaningful application in defending home rather than securing distant objectives. The night sky cleared after the storm's passage, stars emerging with desert clarity above the small border town. In the distance, federal vehicles maintained security presence where cartel forces had recently operated. Community members gathered in small groups, sharing experiences and reinforcing connections that had proven critical during crisis. Harmon observed with professional satisfaction and personal gratitude. 3 decades commanding elite military units had prepared him for this unexpected mission, defending American community against sophisticated adversary using asymmetric methods. The tactical principles he'd refined in global operations had proven directly applicable to homeland defense when conventional security systems faced infiltration. Most importantly, the community had demonstrated resilience through coordinated response rather than individual action. Esperanza's resistance hadn't depended on Harmon's military experience alone, but on citizens uniting with diverse capabilities against common threat. The network he'd established had succeeded because community members recognized shared responsibility for their collective security. As darkness settled completely over the desert landscape, Harmon considered the operation's fundamental revelation. The principles of effective resistance applied universally when communities faced existential challenges. The tactical methods might differ across contexts, but the strategic foundation remained consistent. Identify critical vulnerabilities, establish resilient networks, coordinate diverse capabilities, maintain operational security. For criminal enterprises like Los Hierros, this revelation represented significant strategic setback. Their territorial acquisition strategy depended on community compliance through intimidation and infiltration. Esperanza had demonstrated effective countermeasures that could be replicated in other vulnerable communities, a model of resistance that undermined the cartel's fundamental approach. Federal authorities were already documenting these methods for implementation throughout the border region. Martinez had reported increased communication between law enforcement agencies regarding community resilience strategies. The tactical lessons from Esperanza would inform broader homeland security approaches against similar threats. For Harmon personally, the experience reinforced connection between professional capability and civic responsibility. The tactical expertise developed through military service had found meaningful application in community defense. The strategic thinking refined through global operations had proven directly relevant to protecting American governance from criminal enterprise. As midnight approached, Harmon finally entered his home, physical exhaustion from operational tempo matching satisfaction from successful outcome. The tactical confrontation had concluded, but its implications would continue unfolding as federal authorities implemented permanent security measures and the community incorporated resilience strategies into governance structures. Most significantly, Esperanza had maintained its fundamental identity as American community despite sophisticated attempt at criminal acquisition. The resistance network had demonstrated that determined citizens could effectively counter even professional adversaries when united in common purpose. The American flag would continue flying above Harmon's porch, not as isolated symbol of resistance, but as representation of community that had defended itself against unprecedented threat through coordinated response and shared commitment to democratic governance. 3 weeks after Commander Vega's arrest, Esperanza was transformed. Federal presence remained visible throughout the town. DEA agents coordinated security operations. FBI personnel processed evidence from Seguridad's abandoned facilities. Department of Energy officials conducted comprehensive surveys of the lithium deposits. The sophisticated cartel operation that had nearly secured control of an American town had instead triggered unprecedented federal attention to the border community. Harmon observed these changes from his front porch, where the American flag continued flying as it had throughout the confrontation. The tactical phase had concluded successfully, But the strategic implications continued unfolding in ways that would permanently alter Esperanza's trajectory. Sheriff Martinez approached along the sidewalk, now restored to his official position after the town council, reconstituted without Mayor Diaz, had unanimously invalidated the Segregated Frontera contract. "Morning, Colonel," Martinez called, the formality reflecting renewed respect from the community. "Thought you might want an update." Harmon invited him onto the porch, where coffee waited. "What's the latest?" "Federal task force is establishing permanent monitoring station at the Phillips Ranch," Martinez reported. "Department of Energy has classified the lithium deposits as strategic resource under national security protocols. And the criminal prosecutions? 17 indictments so far, including Vega and Mayor Diaz. The evidence recovered during their hasty withdrawal provided direct links to Los Hierros' leadership. DEA is calling it the most significant cartel intelligence breakthrough in 5 years." Harmon nodded with professional satisfaction. The operation's success extended beyond Esperanza's immediate security to broader implications for border enforcement and resource protection. "The community response has been remarkable," Martinez continued, gesturing toward Main Street where storefronts were being reopened and repaired. "People who were ready to abandon the town are reinvesting. The federal presence means jobs, security, improved infrastructure, and community vigilance," Harmon added, noting the neighborhood watch signs that had appeared throughout Esperanza. The resistance network had evolved into formal community security committees, coordinating with official law enforcement while maintaining independent observation capabilities. Maria Vasquez emerged from the elementary school across the street, leading her students in organized formation. The school had been cleansed of segregated surveillance equipment and now hosted educational programs about community resilience and civic engagement. Maria waved toward Harmon's porch, her students following her example with enthusiastic gestures. "Your fan club grows daily," Martinez observed with a smile. "The school board's considering naming the new security training program after you." Harmon shook his head. "The community did this together. I just provided some organizational structure." "False modesty doesn't suit you, Colonel," Martinez replied. "Your experience made the critical difference. Without your tactical leadership, Los Hierros would be running this town right now." The assessment was professionally accurate, but personally uncomfortable. Harmon had spent decades implementing similar operations in distant conflict zones, organizing local resistance, establishing security networks, countering insurgent control mechanisms. Applying those capabilities to defend his hometown had changed his relationship with Esperanza and its residents. Throughout town, evidence of transformation was visible. The hardware store where Frank Wilson had distributed resistance supplies now hosted community preparation workshops. The church where Father Rodriguez had sounded the alarm bell had become coordination center for recovery efforts. The Rivera family restaurant served as informal gathering point where federal personnel and local residents exchanged information and strengthened community bonds. Most significantly, citizens who had previously maintained cautious distance from each other were now actively collaborating. Hispanic families whose border heritage stretched back generations worked alongside newer residents to rebuild security infrastructure. Retirees contributed specialized knowledge while younger residents provided physical labor. The crisis had revealed Esperanza's fundamental strength, diversity of capabilities united by shared commitment to community preservation. "There's something else," Martinez said, his expression turning serious. "Federal authorities are implementing what they're calling the Esperanza Protocol in vulnerable border communities. They're using our experience as model for identifying and countering similar infiltration attempts." Harmon's tactical mind grasped the implications immediately. Los Hierros had attempted something unprecedented: territorial acquisition within the United States using sophisticated methods rather than conventional criminal activity. Their failure in Esperanza provided critical intelligence about operational methods, personnel profiles, and strategic objectives that could inform countermeasures throughout the border region. Catherine called this morning, Harmon shared. Department of Energy is accelerating mineral rights acquisition for the lithium deposits. They're implementing cooperative development program that includes community profit sharing rather than traditional external exploitation. That's significant, Martinez noted. Economic integration provides sustainable security beyond temporary federal presence. Their conversation was interrupted as Frank Wilson's truck pulled alongside the curb. The hardware store owner approached with uncharacteristic formality, carrying what appeared to be official documentation. "Colonel," Frank began, maintaining the honorific the town had universally adopted since the crisis. "The town council asked me to deliver this officially." He presented a sealed envelope bearing Esperanza's municipal seal. Inside, Harmon found formal resolution declaring him Esperanza Citizen of Honor and requesting his continued security consultation regarding community resilience initiatives. The language was bureaucratic, but the intent was clear. The town was institutionalizing the resistance capabilities that had proven critical during crisis. "They're establishing permanent civilian security committee," Frank explained, "coordinating with federal and local law enforcement while maintaining independent observation and response capabilities. They want you to advise on structure and protocols." Harmon considered the request with professional assessment. The community had demonstrated remarkable capacity for self-organization during crisis. Formalizing those capabilities through institutional structure would provide sustainable security beyond temporary federal intervention. "I'll provide whatever assistance seems useful," Harmon agreed. "But the leadership should come from within the community." "That's already happening," Frank confirmed. "Maria's coordinating educational programs. Father Rodriguez is managing communication systems. The Rivera family is establishing supply management protocols. My store's becoming equipment distribution center. We're building on the network you created during the crisis." As Frank departed, Harmon reflected on the community transformation unfolding around him. The resistance network he'd established using military expertise had evolved beyond tactical necessity into civic infrastructure with long-term implications for community resilience. Throughout the afternoon, similar evidence accumulated. Diana Chun reported that her pharmacy was implementing medical response protocols developed during the crisis. Miguel Rivera's restaurant had established community gathering space where federal authorities shared security updates with residents. Even Mrs. Takahashi's birdwatching hobby had evolved into formal observation system monitoring activity along Esperanza's perimeter. Sheriff Martinez's department had been expanded with federal funding, incorporating the deputies who had maintained resistance activities during occupation. Their experience operating outside official channels had proven valuable during crisis and now informed innovative approaches to community security in partnership with federal agencies. By evening, Harmon was reviewing architectural plans for enhanced town infrastructure, improved water treatment facilities, hardened communication systems, redundant power generation capabilities. Federal response had extended beyond immediate security to addressing vulnerabilities that had facilitated infiltration. Catherine called again as sunset approached, her legal expertise providing perspective on the broader implications. "The Esperanza situation has triggered comprehensive reassessment of border security strategies," she explained. "Federal agencies are implementing community resilience programs rather than just enforcement operations. Your resistance network model is being studied at Homeland Security." The professional assessment was gratifying, but Harmon found greater satisfaction in the community transformation visible from his porch. Citizens who had previously maintained private concerns behind closed doors now gathered openly on sidewalks and in public spaces. Children played under the watchful eyes of parents who coordinated informal neighborhood security. Homes that had removed American flags during occupation now displayed them prominently. As darkness settled over Esperanza, Harmon received unexpected visitors, a delegation of community members led by Father Rodriguez. They carried symbolic gifts representing their appreciation. Maria brought books authored by local children documenting their experiences. Frank presented handcrafted wooden plaque bearing military commendation language. The Rivera family delivered special meal prepared in his honor. The town council is still drafting formal recognition, Father Rodriguez explained. But we wanted to express our gratitude personally. You taught us that security comes through community coordination, not just external protection. Harmon accepted their appreciation with uncharacteristic emotion. 3 decades implementing similar operations in global conflict zones had provided professional satisfaction but limited personal connection. Defending his hometown had bridged that divide, demonstrating that tactical expertise developed through military service had direct application to community preservation. I provided some organizational structure, Harmon acknowledged, but Esperanza's strength came from within. Every community member who chose resistance over submission, cooperation over isolation, contributed to our success. As the visitors departed, Harmon remained on his porch contemplating Esperanza's transformation. The border town had faced existential threat and emerged stronger through coordinated response. Citizens had discovered capabilities they hadn't recognized until crisis demanded their activation. Community bonds had strengthened through shared commitment to preserving fundamental identity and values. Most significantly, Esperanza had demonstrated that determined communities could effectively counter sophisticated external threats through coordination and shared purpose. The resistance model Harmon had implemented, drawing on military experience, had proven directly applicable to civilian context when constitutional governance faced systematic subversion. The American flag above his porch caught evening breeze, its movement symbolizing the town's resilience. Throughout Esperanza, similar flags now flew from homes and businesses that had removed them during occupation. Visual representation of community reclaiming its fundamental identity. Sheriff Martinez returned as night fell, bringing news that federal authorities had intercepted another Seguridad Frontera operation targeting community in Arizona using similar methods. The intelligence secured in Esperanza had provided critical warning indicators that enabled preventive intervention. They're calling it the first success of the Esperanza Protocol, Martinez reported. Early identification of infiltration patterns before occupation could be established. The tactical implications were significant. Los Hierros and similar organizations had developed sophisticated methods for territorial acquisition that conventional law enforcement struggled to counter. Esperanza's experience provided template for effective resistance that could be implemented throughout vulnerable regions. For Harmon personally, the transformation extended beyond professional satisfaction to deeper connection with community purpose. The tactical expertise developed through military career had found meaningful application in homeland defense when conventional security systems proved vulnerable to subversion. We've received federal funding for comprehensive security upgrades, Martinez continued. Communications systems, water treatment facilities, power generation, all the vulnerabilities Los Hierros exploited are being addressed. The physical infrastructure matters, Harmon observed, but the community network is more significant. Technical systems can be compromised, but coordinated citizens providing mutual security creates resilience that's much harder to defeat. As Martinez departed, Harmon considered the transformation's broader implications. Los Hierros had attempted territorial acquisition using methods that blurred distinction between criminal enterprise and insurgent operation. Their sophisticated approach had nearly succeeded through systematic subversion of local governance and security systems. The effective countermeasure hadn't been conventional enforcement, but coordinated community resistance supported by federal capabilities. Esperanza had demonstrated model that could be replicated in vulnerable communities throughout border region and beyond, preparation rather than reaction, coordination rather than isolation, resilience rather than dependency. Most meaningfully, the experience had transformed Harmon's relationship with his hometown. The tactical expertise developed through global operations had found direct application in defending community that had shaped his foundational values. The strategic thinking refined through military career had protected American governance from sophisticated subversion when conventional security proved inadequate. As midnight approached, Harmon finally entered his home, physical exhaustion matching satisfaction from successful outcome. Tomorrow would bring further developments as federal authorities continued securing evidence and implementing security enhancements. The community would continue formalizing resistance capabilities into sustainable civic infrastructure. But tonight, Harmon could acknowledge the operation's personal significance. After 3 decades implementing similar capabilities in distant conflict zones, he had defended his hometown using the same tactical principles. The full-circle completion provided meaning beyond professional accomplishment, connecting military service to fundamental purpose of preserving American communities against evolving threats. The American flag would continue flying above his porch, now joined by similar displays throughout Esperanza, visual representation of community that had transformed crisis into resilience through coordinated response and shared commitment to democratic governance. 1 month after Vega's arrest, Esperanza hosted a community celebration in the town square. American flags adorned every building. Federal authorities maintained discreet presence, while local residents reclaimed public spaces that had briefly fallen under cartel control. Sheriff Martinez presided over a ceremony recognizing citizens whose courage had preserved their community's independence. Harmon observed from the periphery, declining invitations to formal recognition. His military career had taught him that successful operations often required maintaining low profile even after conclusion. The tactical confrontation had ended, but Los Hierros remained operational throughout the border region, their strategic objectives delayed rather than abandoned. Catherine arrived with his grandchildren, their planned visit finally occurring under peaceful circumstances. Daniel and Emma raced toward him with enthusiastic embraces, their innocent excitement untouched by the danger recently overcome. As they explored the celebration with childish wonder, Catherine approached with professional assessment. "The federal response has expanded significantly," she reported. 3 similar operations identified and disrupted in other border communities. The intelligence secured here provided critical patterns for early intervention. Harmon nodded with professional satisfaction. The tactical success in Esperanza had strategic implications beyond local security, exposing sophisticated methodology that threatened communities throughout the region. "They're calling it the Esperanza model in Washington," Catherine continued. "Community resilience integrated with federal response. Your resistance network design is being implemented as formal protocol." Throughout the celebration, evidence of transformation was visible. Community members who had participated in resistance activities now coordinated with federal authorities in structured partnership. Maria Vasquez supervised children's educational program about civic responsibility. Frank Wilson demonstrated emergency communication equipment. The Rivera family distributed food while facilitating information exchange between residents and officials. Most significantly, the community had reclaimed fundamental identity as American town while strengthening internal cohesion. The diverse population had united through shared commitment to preserving democratic governance against external threat. The resistance network established during crisis had evolved into permanent civic infrastructure, enhancing community resilience. As evening approached, Sheriff Martinez delivered formal address acknowledging federal partners while emphasizing community determination. Esperanza faced unprecedented threat and responded with courage that exemplifies American values. He concluded, "We demonstrated that determined citizens united in common purpose can defend their community against even sophisticated adversaries." The cartel's defeat was undeniable, their attempt to establish territorial control decisively rejected through coordinated resistance. Though some questioned the extent of Harman's actions, most celebrated the powerful message sent. America does not bow to intimidation. Harman, humble yet firm, quietly stepped back from the limelight, continuing duties without fanfare, steadfast in moral clarity. Their story stands as a testament to an enduring American truth that genuine strength lies not in aggression but in preparedness, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to justice and liberty for all. What do you think about this incredible stand? Do you believe strength alone guarantees justice, or does real power lie in partnership, strategy, and bravery? Share your perspective in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.